I still remember the first time I stumbled upon a true story that would change my life forever. It was an article about a small town in rural America where a young girl went missing, and her disappearance was shrouded in mystery. The more I read, the more I became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind her vanishing act. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would take me down a rabbit hole of unspeakable horrors. As I delved deeper into the world of true stories, I began to notice a pattern. Each tale seemed to share a common thread, an unshakable sense of dread that lingered long after the story was told. It was as if the darkness itself had seeped into the fabric of reality, infecting every narrative with its malevolent presence. I started to wonder, what lies at the heart of these true stories? Is it simply a reflection of our darkest fears, or is there something more sinister at play? As I pondered this question, I began to experience strange occurrences that made me question my own sanity. Doors would slam shut on their own, and disembodied whispers seemed to follow me everywhere I went. It was as if the darkness had finally caught up with me. And so, I embarked on a journey to uncover the truth behind these true stories. A journey that would take me down a path of terror, where the lines between reality and myth blurred into an eerie, unrecognizable landscape. This is my story, a tale of obsession, madness, and the dark side of true stories explained. I had always been fascinated by the story of Blackwood House, a mansion in the depths of rural England that was said to be haunted by the malevolent spirit of its former owner, Malcolm Blackwood. The tale went that Blackwood had made a pact with a dark entity to ensure his family's prosperity, but at a terrible cost: their souls. I couldn't help but feel drawn to this twisted legend, and so I decided to pay a visit to the crumbling mansion, hoping to uncover some truth behind the haunting rumors. As I stepped out of my car and onto the overgrown driveway, an eerie feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. The once grand mansion loomed before me, its turrets and gargoyles reaching towards the sky like skeletal fingers. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I approached the entrance, where a weathered wooden sign creaked in the wind, bearing the Blackwood family crest, a twisted black tree with roots that seemed to grasp for the heavens. I pushed open the creaking front door and stepped into the musty darkness within. The air inside was heavy with the scent of decay and rot, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every step I took echoed through the empty halls, making me feel like an intruder in a place that was most definitely not mine. As I explored the labyrinthine corridors, I stumbled upon a room that seemed frozen in time. The furniture was still arranged as if the Blackwood family had simply gotten up and left in the middle of dinner, leaving behind a trail of uneaten food and abandoned conversations. In the center of the room, a single photograph hung on the wall, depicting Malcolm Blackwood himself, his eyes seeming to follow me as I moved. I knew then that I had to uncover the truth behind Blackwood's dark past. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of my descent into madness. The darkness in Blackwood House seemed to seep into my very bones, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being slowly consumed by its malevolent presence. As I turned to leave, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A small, leather-bound book lying on the floor, its pages fluttering open as if inviting me to read. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should heed the ominous warning or continue my investigation. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the book, revealing a message scrawled in red ink. "You shouldn't be here." I had always been fascinated by the story of Emily Maynard, a young girl who vanished from her family's farm in rural Illinois. The last time anyone saw her was on a sweltering summer afternoon, when she had wandered into the nearby woods to pick wildflowers. Her parents reported that she had returned an hour later, but with no flowers and a look of unease on her face. She claimed to have seen strange things in the woods, shadowy figures lurking just beyond the tree line, and an unsettling feeling of being watched. But when her family went searching for her, she was nowhere to be found. The investigation that followed was stymied by a lack of evidence and conflicting eyewitness accounts. Some claimed to have seen Emily arguing with a figure in a black hoodie, while others swore they had seen her walking alone into the woods. But one thing was certain: Emily's disappearance remained a mystery, leaving behind only the faintest whisper of terror. As I delved deeper into the case, I began to uncover some disturbing inconsistencies in the official story. It seemed that Emily's parents had been hiding something from the police, and that their farm was shrouded in a dark history of strange occurrences and unexplained events. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Emily's disappearance than met the eye. One night, as I pored over old newspaper articles and witness statements, I stumbled upon a cryptic message scrawled in the margins of a police report. It read, "They're still out there." I knew then that I had to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind Emily's disappearance and the sinister forces that seemed to be lurking in the shadows. As I continued my investigation, I began to experience strange occurrences myself, feeling eyes upon me and hearing whispers in the dead of night. It was as if Emily's spirit was trying to communicate with me, to warn me away from something. But what? I knew then that I had to keep pushing forward, no matter how scared I got. For some reason, I felt a deep connection to Emily's story, and I was determined to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. Little did I know, this would lead me down a path of terror from which I might never escape. The woods seemed to be watching me now, their shadows twisting into grotesque forms that lurked just beyond the tree line. I knew then that I had to get out of there, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. The darkness closed in around me, and I was consumed by a sense of creeping dread. And then I saw her, a figure standing just beyond the trees, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was Emily, or at least it was something that looked like her. But as she took a step closer, her face began to distort and twist, revealing a visage that was not human at all. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet as I desperately tried to escape the terror that was unfolding before me. The last thing I saw was Emily's twisted face, her eyes burning with an evil intensity as she whispered a single word in my ear: "Mine." I was searching for answers in the depths of the abandoned asylum, where Emily's spirit had been seen roaming. The air was thick with the scent of decay and rot, and I could feel the weight of history bearing down upon me. As I turned a corner, I stumbled upon a room that seemed frozen in time. The beds were still made, the hospital equipment was still set up, and the walls were still adorned with the faded photographs of patients who had once called this place home. It was as if no one had ever left. And then I saw her. Mary, the patient who had been locked away in this very room for decades. She was standing in front of a mirror, staring at her own reflection. Her eyes were black as coal, and her skin was deathly pale. She didn't seem to notice me at first, but as I took a step closer, she turned around. Our eyes met, and I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body. Mary's face was twisted in a mixture of sadness and anger, and I could feel the pain emanating from her like a palpable force. She began to walk towards me, her movements slow and deliberate. As she approached, I could see that she was holding a small doll in her hand. It was made of porcelain, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to stare right through me. Mary reached out a bony finger and touched my face, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. I tried to step back, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. Mary's eyes seemed to bore into my soul, and I could feel her pain and suffering washing over me like a tidal wave. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, the doll still clutched in Mary's hand. The room was silent except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I stumbled to my feet, desperate to get out of there as fast as possible. But as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of myself in a nearby mirror. My eyes were black as coal and my skin was deathly pale. I was no longer human. Mary's spirit had taken over and I was now hers. I stumbled forward, driven by a compulsion to uncover the truth behind Emily's disappearance. But as I walked, the world around me began to distort and twist, like a funhouse mirror reflecting my own twisted psyche. I knew then that I was trapped in a living nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. The darkness closed in around me, and I was consumed by an eternal scream. As I delved deeper into the abandoned asylum, I began to feel a sense of unease. The air was thick with the scent of decay and rot, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. I had been warned not to explore this place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important hidden within its crumbling walls. Every step I took echoed through the empty corridors, making me feel like an intruder in a place that was most definitely not mine. I began to wonder if Emily's spirit was still here, watching and waiting for me to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. As I turned a corner, I stumbled upon a room that seemed frozen in time. The beds were still made, the hospital equipment was still set up, and the walls were still adorned with the faded photographs of patients who had once called this place home. But what caught my attention was the door at the far end of the room, slightly ajar as if someone had recently passed through it. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I approached the door, my heart pounding in my chest. As I pushed it open, a cold breeze swept past me, extinguishing the faint light that filtered through the grimy windows. I was plunged into darkness, and for a moment I couldn't see or hear anything. But then a faint whisper seemed to caress my ear. "Get out while you still can." The voice was soft and raspy, but it sent shivers down my spine. I tried to step back, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the lights flickered back to life, illuminating the room with an eerie glow. I blinked several times, trying to clear my vision, but when I looked again, something was different. The beds were now empty, the hospital equipment was gone, and on the walls, new photographs had appeared. They showed a young couple, smiling and happy, surrounded by lush greenery and sunshine. But what caught my attention was the small inscription etched into the corner of each photograph. "We were never here." I felt a wave of confusion wash over me as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Who had put these photographs up, and why? As I looked around the room, trying to take it all in, I saw that everything else seemed to be off. The furniture was slightly askew, the walls were cracked and faded, and the air was thick with an unsettling energy. I knew then that I wasn't alone in this place. Emily's spirit was here, watching me, waiting for me to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. And something else, something that didn't feel human at all. As I delved deeper into the abandoned asylum, I stumbled upon a hidden room that seemed to have been locked away for decades. The air was thick with an eerie energy, and I could feel the weight of the cult's presence bearing down on me. On the walls, strange symbols were etched in a language I couldn't understand, pulsing with a malevolent power. In the center of the room, a large stone altar stood, surrounded by candles that seemed to burn with an otherworldly flame. It was then that I saw them, the cult members, gathered around the altar, their eyes closed in reverence. They were performing some sort of twisted ritual, and I felt a chill run down my spine as I watched. The leader, a tall figure with eyes that seemed to bore into my soul, raised his hands to the sky and began to chant in a language that sent shivers down my spine. The air was filled with an eerie energy, and I could feel the power of the ritual building to a crescendo. Suddenly, the candles flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. The chanting stopped, and an oppressive silence fell over the group. And then I heard it, a low, pulsing hum that seemed to emanate from the altar itself. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being manipulated by the cult's dark magic. As I watched in horror, the symbols on the walls began to glow with an eerie light, illuminating the faces of the cult members. They were no longer human. Their eyes had turned black as coal, and their skin was deathly pale. And then they opened their mouths, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. The leader's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a jolt of fear as he spoke in a voice that was both familiar and yet completely alien. "You should not be here," he hissed, "but since you are, you will join us." As the cult members began to close in on me, I knew that I had to escape, but it was too late. The ritual had begun, and I was now a part of it. The last thing I remembered was the feeling of being pulled into the darkness, my mind consumed by an eternal scream. As I ventured deeper into the haunted mansion, I stumbled upon a door that seemed to be locked and hidden from view. The air around me grew thick with anticipation as I reached out to touch the doorknob. It was then that I heard a faint whisper in my ear, "Don't open it." But I couldn't resist the temptation. With a deep breath, I turned the handle and pushed the door open. What I saw took my breath away. Inside the room, there was a single chair, suspended high above the ground by a thin thread. In the center of the chair, a small, ornate box sat atop a pedestal. The box was adorned with strange symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. As I reached out to touch the box, I felt a sudden jolt of electricity run through my body. Suddenly, the room began to spin around me and I stumbled backwards, gasping for air. When I regained my composure, I saw that the room had changed. The walls were now adorned with photographs of the mansion's former occupants. Emily, the girl who had gone missing, was among them. But what caught my attention was the final photograph on the wall, a picture of myself, standing in front of the very same box. It was then that I realized the horrifying truth. I was the product of some twisted experiment conducted by the mansion's former occupants. The cult had been experimenting with the human mind, using me as a test subject. And now I was trapped in this haunted mansion, forever bound to the dark secret behind it. As I stood in front of the box, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. The air around me grew colder and I could see my breath misting in the air. And then I heard it, a low, menacing chuckle that seemed to come from all directions at once. The sound sent shivers down my spine, and I knew that I was not alone. Suddenly, the room began to distort and ripple, like the surface of a pond struck by a stone. The walls seemed to melt away, revealing a dark, twisted forest beyond. And then I saw it, a figure emerging from the shadows, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was tall and gaunt, with skin that seemed to be stretched too tight over its bones. Its eyes burned with an intense hunger, and I knew that I was in the presence of something truly evil. The entity began to move towards me, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable terror. I tried to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. The entity loomed over me, its hot breath washing over me like a wave. And then it spoke. Its voice was like a rusty gate creaking in the wind. "You should not have come here," it growled. "Now you will never leave." As the entity reached out to touch me, I felt my mind begin to fragment and break apart. I was consumed by a sense of utter despair and hopelessness. And then everything went black. As I regained consciousness, I found myself back in my own bed, surrounded by the familiar walls of my childhood home. But something felt off. The memories of the haunted mansion and the supernatural entity still lingered in my mind, refusing to be shaken. And then it hit me, the vanishing town. Emily's disappearance was not just a local mystery, but a global enigma. I had stumbled upon a hidden message in the abandoned asylum, pointing to an ancient cult that had been experimenting with interdimensional travel. The cult had created a portal to other worlds, and the towns were being pulled into these alternate realities one by one. But why? And where was Emily now? I knew I had to find out more. I spent hours poring over old books and newspapers, searching for any mention of the vanishing town or the cult's activities. And then it happened. A cryptic message appeared on my phone. "Meet me at the old clock tower at midnight," it read. "Come alone." I knew who might be behind the message. It was Emily, or at least her consciousness. I made my way to the clock tower, my heart pounding with anticipation. And when I arrived, I saw a figure waiting for me in the shadows. It was Emily, but not as I had ever seen her before. Her eyes were glowing with an otherworldly light, and her skin seemed to be shifting and flowing like a liquid. "I've been trying to find you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The cult created a portal to another world, one where we can be free from the cycle of terror and despair." And then it clicked into place. Emily was not just a girl who had gone missing, but a doorway to a new reality. One where I could join her, and together we could unravel the mystery of the vanishing town once and for all. I knew that I had to act fast. Emily and I had stumbled upon a sinister plot to cover up the truth about the vanishing town. The cult had been using their interdimensional portal to transport people from one world to another, creating a never-ending cycle of terror and despair. But there was more. They were also experimenting with mind control, using the portal to implant false memories in the minds of those who had been taken. I knew that I had to stop them, but it wouldn't be easy. The cult had powerful allies and resources at their disposal, and they would stop at nothing to keep their secrets safe. Emily and I decided to go undercover, infiltrating the cult's ranks and gathering evidence of their sinister plot. We spent weeks gathering information, gathering clues, and building a case against the cult. But as we delved deeper into the cult's inner workings, we realized that we were in grave danger. The cult had eyes and ears everywhere, and they would not hesitate to silence us if they discovered our true intentions. One night, as we were leaving a meeting with a high-ranking cult member, we were ambushed by a group of heavily armed guards. We fought bravely, but we were outnumbered and outgunned. Just when all hope seemed lost, a mysterious figure appeared out of the shadows, taking down the guards one by one. It was a woman, dressed in black leather and sporting a pair of sunglasses. She was a skilled fighter, and she had been tracking the cult for months. Together, we fought our way out of the building, escaping into the night with our lives. But as we caught our breath, I realized that something was off. The woman's eyes seemed to be hiding a secret, and her smile seemed too wide. Was she friend or foe? And what did she really want from us? As we ran through the streets, our pursuers hot on our heels, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off about the mysterious woman. She seemed to know more about us than she let on, and her motives were unclear. But we had no time to dwell on these thoughts as we finally reached the safety of Emily's car. We locked the doors and started the engine, ready to make a break for it. Just as we were pulling away from the curb, the woman appeared out of nowhere, jumping into the backseat and revealing a shocking truth. "You're not who you think you are," she said, her voice low and menacing. "Emily, you're not just a victim of the cult, you're one of them." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Emily's eyes were cloudy with confusion, and she seemed to be staring at me with a mixture of fear and recognition. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. The woman leaned forward, her face twisted into a grotesque grin. "You're a product of their experiments," she spat. "A clone created to infiltrate the cult and gather intel." Emily's eyes snapped back into focus, and she turned on me with a look of horror. "No, that can't be true," she whispered. I felt like my whole world was crashing down around me. Was everything I thought I knew about myself a lie? And what did this mean for our chances of stopping the cult once and for all? I stared at Emily in horror, my mind reeling with the implications of her words. Was I a clone? A product of some twisted experiment designed to infiltrate the cult and gather intel? The thought sent me spiraling down a rabbit hole of madness, my grip on reality tenuous at best. Emily's eyes seemed to bore into my soul, filled with a mixture of fear and pity. She reached out a trembling hand and took mine, her touch sending shivers down my spine. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of thoughts racing through my mind. "We'll get through this together." But I knew it was too late. The damage had been done. My sense of self had been shattered, leaving me a hollow shell of a person. The world around me began to distort and twist, like a funhouse mirror reflecting the darkest corners of my own psyche. I felt myself falling, plummeting down a vortex of madness that seemed to have no end. Colors swirled together in a maddening dance, sounds screamed in my ears, and visions haunted my every waking moment. I was trapped in a living nightmare from which I might never awaken. And yet, even as the darkness closed in around me, I knew that I couldn't give up. Not yet. For Emily's sake, for mine, I had to keep fighting. But as I descended deeper into the abyss of my own mind, I realized that the line between reality and madness was thin indeed. Which one was I truly stuck in? And would anyone ever be able to find me again?